This is my late 2011 15-inch MacBook Pro. It was my college computer and daily driver for 7 years when the GPU had finally unseated itself from the motherboard. I say finally because this was a common issue for these specific laptops, and Apple was forced to put out a recall. This had actually happened once before, a couple days before the recall had expired, so I was lucky to get it fixed for free the first time. This problem was identified by the screen having horizontal lines run through it and eventually not booting properly and having a blank screen. After reading into the issue, I know that even though the laptop was fixed, the same issue would resurface eventually. Sure enough, 6 months later, the same issue resurfaced and I ended up building my first desktop PC. If you'd like to see that build where I detail the experience, I have the video of that process on this channel. While I had a newer, faster, better computer to do my work, I still had a problem. Apple is notorious for its walled gardens in which they want their users to be entirely inside their own ecosystem. This also ran true for iOS app developers. Unfortunately, my MacBook Pro had failed before I was able to completely wrap up a few projects, and I wouldn't be able to easily fix and upload the finished apps to my GitHub on my new PC. I saw that some people were reseating their GPUs back onto their motherboards, and so I thought I'd give it a shot since there wasn't much to lose. I only had to have a working MacBook long enough to wrap up the iOS apps and push them to GitHub, so I didn't really care if my fixed laptop lasted long term. The first step in this repair project was to take out the motherboard, take off the heatsink, and then clean off the previous thermal paste from that. Now, I didn't end up having the right Torx screwdrivers, so I had to get those from Amazon, but other than that, it was pretty straightforward. In order to keep track of the pieces, I put them in that muffin pan, and that is sort of a picture of what the cleaned off motherboard looks like with the heatsink off to the right. Okay. Well, hopefully I can keep it concentrated just to this because I don't want to be heating up the external parts, but the actual process of reseating the GPU back onto the motherboard is pretty straightforward. You can either throw the whole thing into the oven, or you can do what I did here, which was put it on a baking sheet covered with tinfoil and use a heat gun and heat the GPU specifically for a couple minutes just to see if the solder will reconnect the GPU back onto the motherboard. You really have no way of telling until you actually reassemble everything, but after this process, I reapplied some thermal paste and added the heatsink back onto it and reassembled everything to see if it would actually work. On the whole, I would say that if you are kind of new to this sort of thing, it's really not as intimidating as it seems. Just making sure you keep track of everything, which using that muffin pan was really helpful for me. That was probably the hardest thing. I also cleaned off everything with air and rubbing alcohol. And now it came the moment of truth to fire it up and see if it actually boot up. I never actually recorded footage of the laptop when it didn't work, but what it would look like is as I try to sign in, these horizontal lines would appear, and as it tried to load, it would either turn blank or not fire up at all. So after speeding up this footage, you can see after signing in, it does end up booting up properly. I was able to have this computer work long enough in order to wrap up my iOS projects and get them pushed to GitHub. So I would consider this whole project a success. After about 4 months, it did end up failing again, but by that point, I was doing most all my work on my desktop anyways, and so it didn't really matter. Anyways, that wraps up this video. If you found the information interesting or helpful, I'd appreciate a like on the video. And please subscribe for more content like this in the future, as well as software development and other woodworking. I keep planning on doing another video per week, and there's a lot of interesting things I have in the works right now. So if you want to continue on this journey, I'd really appreciate a subscription, and I hope to see you in future videos. Thanks.